Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Himes here, joined by a guy I used to call friend, Bob Stewart. Now, Bob, why do I say that? Because
I'm interested. I'm interested.
Just yesterday, I was listening to the Win, Make, Give podcast. And I finally listened to the episode that I happened to be away for. And you seem to be enjoying that just a little too much to my old friend, Bob Stewart.
Well, only because I think that's the only episode you've ever missed. But I've missed like 10. And you guys take all these pot shots at me for being on vacation. So yeah.
All right, so and I want to let you know, I listened all the way to the end and heard the lovely things Ben Kinney said. And then, of course, you took that all away again. So, Bob, not necessarily my friend, yet still my partner here when it comes to Win, Make, Give. Bob, we're going to have an amazing interview today. I know our audience is going to listen and they're going to sit there and they're going to say, we want more from this guy. I already have the feeling this is one of those guys we might be asking back next season when he comes out with his next book to say, let's talk more. I want to bring him on right away. And it's Michael Timms is going to be joining us. And Bob, you know, I don't do the intros. I don't read some bio. Michael, I want to welcome you to Win, Make, Give. And I want you to introduce yourself to our audience today.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me with you. And also, Bob, nice to be on with you. So my name is Michael Timms. I've started telling people that I'm a leadership development consultant because nobody knows what that means. But I help executives create a culture that produces better leaders. And I do that in a couple of ways. I teach them how to be better leaders. I teach them some high impact leadership behaviors that work. But I also help them create a system and a process to develop the leaders within the organization so that they never have to wonder who's going to be filling their next key leadership role. That's what I do. My background is in human resources. I love the outdoors. Have a wonderful wife and 3 daughters. There you go. That's my spiel.
Michael, I assume the audience can't necessarily see us, but you've got like mountains in the background. And what is that like your next like target right there? You're going to be at the top of that mountain one day or what?
I was at the top of that mountain. I took that picture. I took the picture at the top of that mountain. Yeah. It's just by, so I live just north of Washington. So I'm in Canada. And
wait a minute, time out. Let's get more. Okay. Before you go on, tell us more. So is that Whistler?
No, this is actually Mount Baker. So,
that's Baker.
Wait a minute. You're talking my mountain. So you're coming south of the border. I live an hour and a half from Mount Baker. So apparently we're all in the same area.
He's in Birch Bay.
I'm in Birch Bay, just south of Blaine there for you.
Oh, no way. Okay, awesome.
All right, so folks, just come back later. We're going to catch up on all the things going on in the area.
I got to tell you about this. So since you're a local, I got to tell you about this. Hopefully there's no Border Patrol folks listening to this because what I did actually, it's a really cool hike because you start in Canada and then you hike across the border, you hike south into the US. And then I got up to this 9,000 foot peak, took a picture, and then I took a picture of Mount Baker in the background. So it's I love hiking, camping, mountain biking, skiing, everything outdoors.
Well,
love it.
Well, this is a great area of the world to live in for that kind of thing, right?
For sure, yes.
Absolutely. And we love going across the border when they'll allow us to again, really. We love going across the border for Whistler. I proposed to my wife. We had our honeymoon up there. We named our dog after the mountain. We love getting up to your side of the border to get hiking up in the beautiful mountains of Whistler. All right. So now we know about the mountains behind you. And boy, we've just created a super bond that goes with it. Now, Michael, you've got a new book out called How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. I love it. And when I was reading about it and doing my homework on the book, here's what the promotion of it says, right? Learn 3 powerful habits that will not only make you a better leader, they will also inspire others to take more ownership of results. I think that's the headline for this podcast episode, because we've got so many people who are leaders, whether that's in their family life, whether, of course, we're leading ourselves, and whether it's, of course, as they're entrepreneurs leading their business. Let's start there. Give us the 3 powerful habits that are going to make us better leaders and inspire others, and then we'll dive into them deeper.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, maybe I'll just give you a little quick background. Like, why do we care? Why do we care about helping the people around us be more accountable? I think most of the people in leadership positions, they wish that the people that work for them would care as much about the business as they do. and care as much about getting the right results as they do. And that's really why we care about accountability. We want to help other people, take more ownership of results. And it's interesting when I talk to CEOs. I talk to a lot of CEO groups, and when I say, hey, look, there's really kind of three different domains, three different ways that you can really influence accountability within your organization. One is through your personal example. Two is the way in which you hold others accountable. And three, there are some levers that you can pull within the organization to make it easier for everybody to be more accountable. And those are what I call the conditions of accountability. And I said, look, we don't have all day. We can't talk about all three of these things. If you had to choose, which one of these topics would you like to learn about? Let me know. What would that be? And so anyways, I do this using a live polling app. And every single time I do this, I can tell you, I know before I ask the question, which one is going to be dead last. Which one of those three, either my personal example as a leader, how I hold others accountable, or the things I can do to create organizational accountability. Which one do they want to learn about the least? It's always, how can I be a better example of personal accountability, right? That's the last one for sure, every single time. And I've done this with thousands of CEOs. And I preface that, I tell that story or that anecdote to emphasize one point. And that point is, in fact, the most important thing you can do. If you hope to create a culture of accountability within your organization, if you want the other people around you to take more ownership of their work, the most important thing you can do is to be the supreme example of accountability in your organization. Because look, nobody is going to demonstrate accountability to a higher degree than their leader. And so leaders need to make sure that they are setting an extremely high limit. The only thing is that most people in leadership positions already think that they are setting that high limit. And I'm here to tell you there are some behaviors, there are some things you can do to set just that awesome example that will actually inspire other people within your organization to follow you. And in prefacing these three behaviors, I'll just say they are totally simple to wrap your head around. But each one of these three behaviors goes against our basic human nature.
Okay. And we like simple because we like to keep it easy for Bob.
Totally.
So we like things to be simple, Michael. We appreciate that.
Well, you know what? In order to get anybody to change their behavior, you got to keep it simple.
Yes.
But they're very hard. Now, the first habit is number one, very simple. Don't blame. When things go wrong, don't blame. Why? Because blame kills accountability in yourself, and it kills accountability in those around you. And I'll explain a little bit.
Okay.
Habit number two, look in the mirror. When things go wrong, you need to be the first to acknowledge and to say, you know what? This is how I think I contributed to this problem. I might not have caused it. I might not be 100% of the reason. I might not even be 90% of the reason. But you know what? This is my part in the problem. Okay?
Michael, we call that our CEO founder. He'll ask, "Where's your DNA on that?" That's the term we kind of throw around in our world, but same, right? Like, look in the mirror. Exactly. Where's your DNA on that thing?
Yeah, and I've heard the same. I've heard like, "Where's your fingerprint on that?" Right? Yep. So same gist, right? Habit number three is engineer the solution. So focus on fixing processes, not on fixing people. Now, so anyways, there's a lot behind those, but like I said, every single one of those goes against our basic human nature, both the way that we're psychologically and the way that we're biologically wired.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by the engineer the solution, but you said fix the process, not the people. Talk to me for that one. Like, is it common, I guess, then that leaders come in and they think like, it was this person that did this thing, and if we could just get this person to do it better, and they don't even think about the process. I mean, is that kind of what happens then?
Totally. And when you start to look at when things go wrong, so first of all, our brains are wired to want to come to very simple explanations for why bad things happen, and those simple explanations tend to be, well, it's because that person's an idiot. Okay, that's why this bad thing happened. But in fact, when you start to peel back, when you start to take a look at problems, there's almost always other factors involved, including your own decisions, your own past decisions and behavior. As you put it, your DNA also, in some way tends to have contributed to this problem that we're talking about. And so before you start to say, before you kind of give into that natural inclination to say, okay, stop being an idiot or stop being so careless, why don't you take a look and see, what else is going on? What processes are perhaps broken. Do you want me? I'll give you an example. Here's a quick example. My assistant and I. So I actually just mentioned to you that I do these live polling things, and so we got a bunch of these different polls, right? And so my assistant and I discovered that one of our surveys was deleted, gone, and we didn't have any of the record of it. And so there's only 3 people that it could have been. It could have been me who deleted it, my assistant, or her assistant. And the 2 of us, we knew we did not do that, and so it had to be her assistant. So immediately we were like, oh, we're going to kill her. As a matter of fact, my assistant was like, I am going to murder her. But then we said, hey, look, let's follow the 3 habits of personal accountability. Number 1, don't blame. That's actually not going to help. It's actually not going to help us if we, rub our nose in her mistake. It's just going to make her, feel like she's walking on eggshells, and it's not going to help. Okay. Habit number 2, look in the mirror. Did we do anything to contribute to this problem? And as a matter of fact, we did. When we took a look at that and we said, okay, where did the process break down is really the question that we asked. All of our templates are just kind of in this one area. And a very simple solution would be, hey, let's just take all of our templates and put them into a separate folder to make it virtually impossible for somebody to accidentally delete, one of our templates. And so it's like, oh, okay. And so that's the engineer the solution portion of this. Let's take a look at the process. How is the process basically either allowing my assistant to make a mistake, or in fact, in some cases, encouraging her to make a mistake? Because in that example, there was actually a time before that I'd actually thought several times before. I'm like, oh, gee, I really need to be careful because I almost accidentally deleted one of these templates. And so anyways, that's just a simple example of when you see a problem, resist the urge to blame the person closest to the mess, which is the very first urge you're going to have. And instead start to take a look at the processes that are enabling or allowing those mistakes to happen.
Wow.
It's I think that's one of those things that like you like somewhere, like we all know this, or a lot of us know this, but like you said, it's that human nature to go to the thing that, like, even though we've learned this at some point, it's not our default, right? Our default is she messed this up.
Yeah, totally.
Why is that our default? Like, is there some science behind that? Something that came out of when we were like living in small clans and hunting and gathering or something?
Totally. And actually, there's a brilliant question, Bob. Yes, as a matter of fact, there is some science behind that. We tend to blame for a number of different reasons. But first of all, we like to find external explanations for our problems rather than internal. For that very that very reason that 10,000, 20,000 years ago, it was our ancestors. We descended from very confident people. We descended from the people who said, you know what? They took a look at that woolly mammoth and like, I got this. I can take this on. We did not descend from the people who are like, we're screwed. We're all going to die. Okay. So the very first reason why we default to blaming external things is because it protects our ego. Okay. And because our brains realize that high confidence is essential for high performance. And sometimes we forget that. So that's one reason.
But let's be clear, everybody listening. High confidence doesn't mean you have to be egotistic where you're running around. We know, and Ben's our great example that we love to show. Bob and I'll tell people, I've never seen an ego on that guy in all the years I've known him. Yet that is one high performance guy. He's got confidence, yet it doesn't mean he has to be arrogant and running around with that ego strutting on his shoulder. So just want to make sure everybody understands that there's that differentiation in there.
The other thing I would say is high confidence doesn't lead to high performance, but you need, in order to be a high performer, you have to have high confidence, but it's not a two-way.
Correct, exactly. Right? And when you take a look at anybody who performs at a high level, you're going to find like Olympic athletes, for example, they've got to feel like, I got this, right?
Yeah.
If there's that nagging, I don't know, I think I'm going to crash. You're going to crash, right?
Yeah. Especially on those extremes, right? When you're skiing down a mountain at 700 miles an hour.
Exactly. But there's something actually I find really fascinating about the science about why we blame, is that it's actually, so it's recent brain imaging has discovered that when we see a problem, when we see something bad happen, well, actually, let me start. When we see something good happen, what happens is our brain routes that information to our prefrontal cortex. This is our decision. This is where the executive functions take place in our brain. And there's a bazillion different possible explanations for why that good thing happened. And so our frontal cortex takes a while to come up with some sort of explanation. And our frontal cortex tends to conclude that good things happen by fluke, not because people are hardworking. Now, when we witness something bad, what happens is that our brain routes that information to be processed by the amygdala. And the amygdala is that's the fight or flight area of our brain. And the thing is when our brain asks our amygdala, hey, why did that bad thing happen? Our amygdala only has one explanation. And the explanation is because that person is an idiot. That's all it's got. That's all it can come up with. And the thing is because it's only got one explanation to come up with, it comes up with that explanation lightning fast. So fast, in fact, that we don't even notice we've just made an assumption. And we just know they're an idiot. And we just know they did it on purpose, right? And so that's actually what's going on inside of our brain, is that when we witness a negative event, we have this immediate knee-jerk reaction to blame the person closest to the mess, because our brain is actually hardwired, not just psychologically wired, but actually biologically wired to direct us to that conclusion.
And if we were the closest person to that mess, the ego inside of our brain goes, somebody's responsible for this, not me. And then I look around and I find the next closest person to the mess.
So that's the psychological aspect, and there is a psychological explanation for this, and it's called the attribution bias. And we tend to conclude that, for example, there's the attribution bias and there's a self-serving bias. So we tend to conclude that what people do is a reflection of who they are. Right? If you slip, you're a clumsy person. That's just who you are. Never mind that there was water on the floor. You should have been more careful. But if I slip on the floor, it's because some idiot didn't clean it up. That's the self-serving bias. The first one was the attribution bias. The second one was the self-serving bias. And so we also have these psychological gremlins that we're fighting in our brain that again kind of points us in the direction of other people or bad circumstances are to blame for all of our problems, when in fact that is not true.
It's fascinating. And okay, so we start with habit number one is don't blame.
Yeah.
Yet, as Bob was even saying at the beginning, it's just normal reaction to blame. And Michael, you're an expert at this. Heck, you wrote the book on it, right? Yet I'm going to bet that when something goes wrong, even though your mouth might not say the words, the first thought that goes through your head is, whose fault is this, or who am I blaming, right? So it's okay. So our audience out there listening, it's okay when you have that first natural, as you're saying, it's science. It's just biology. It's we're going to do this. The question is not how do you immediately react? It's how do you respond? And it's stopping, like you said, saying, hey, it's going to do no benefit to blame her for what she's done. Let's just skip right over that and achieve habit number one.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how you can. I'm so glad you said that, Chad, because you're right. If you if you immediately go to that blame place, well, good. Okay. Well, then you're a human being. We just established you're human. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, but I'm telling you this so that you can stop yourself, because what happens is, and I remember initially I said, blame kills accountability, and it kills accountability in yourself and in others. And I'll explain why. It kills accountability in yourself because if other people or circumstances are to blame for all of my problems, well, then there's nothing that I can do. Right. I'm just screwed unless these other people or circumstances change on their own. There's nothing I can do, and my life is just going to be horrible. Right. And that's how blame kills accountability in yourself. But it kills accountability in others for this very simple reason. Nobody is going to take accountability if they think they're going to be blamed for doing so. If people are expecting you to rub their noses in their mistakes, well, nobody's going to admit mistakes. And so it's going to do no good. Blame does absolutely no good, but it actually inspires a whole host of other negative behaviors, the most common of which is defensiveness and deflecting. Well, it wasn't my fault. It's Chad's fault, right? And Chad's like, well, wait a minute, Michael, it's not my fault. It's Bob's fault, right? And that's what happens. Is it goes around the organization. We play ping pong with this blame bomb, and you're just destroying relationships, and you're not solving the freaking problem. So that's why blame doesn't work, and that's why
that's a great message right there for everybody to hear. I love that you're playing ping pong with the blame bomb, right? I think that needs to be one of our new shirts, Bob, or something like that, right? Stop playing ping pong.
I have a 4 and a 5-year-old, Michael. I have a 14-year-old as well. That's mostly through these, but like this is resonating for me as a dad right now, right? I'm like, yeah, Carter, you spilled that thing. And he's like, I don't know, Jay spilled that thing.
I didn't do it.
You know what, Bob, actually, you just reminded me of a story. So I actually, when I was learning these things, these 3 habits of personal accountability, I started, of course, testing it on my family.
Of course.
And
thank you to all of our families that have been unwilling volunteers in all of the things we have tested upon them. Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, when I realized the damage, all of the bad things that blame does, and the fact that it actually does zero good, I started to notice how often I blame my kids. And if you're a parent, maybe you can relate to this, but my least favorite parenting activity is trying to get my kids out the door on time.
That's
actually,
every morning.
It's probably tied with keeping the kitchen clean. But anyways, those are my 2 most, it just makes me insane, right? And so for the longest time, I was blaming my kids and just, they're freaking idiots, right? How can they not get out of the house on time?
We brush your teeth every morning the same way, Carter. Like, just get up here. We're going to brush your teeth. Totally.
The routine doesn't change. It's the same thing every day, right? So anyways, but then I started to realize and by the way, here is the secret to getting out of, to preventing yourself from spawning that whole blame game, is to, instead of, as Chad put it, instead of asking, who's at fault here, to ask, where did the process break down? And so I started to ask that question. I said, where did the process break down, and how's the external environment not, or maybe encouraging my kids not to get out the door on time? And I discovered a couple of things. Number one, I discovered that they didn't know what time it was. There was no clock. So they all had an alarm clock in their room, but maybe it wasn't facing the right way. Anyways, they didn't know what time. I knew what time it was. But the other thing is, they didn't really know the schedule. They didn't know, when do I have to be finished eating breakfast? When do I have to, have my hair done? When do I have to have my clothes on? Stuff like that. And when do I need to be sitting by the back door? They didn't know the schedule. And so those are 2 major factors that were working against my kids. And so one night, once I discovered this, I got a giant clock and hung it in the common area where their bedrooms all lead out into. We even put clocks in bathrooms, right? We put clocks everywhere. But then the other thing was I posted the schedule. I said, at this time, I need to do this. And then I went a step further, and I actually set the alarm on the oven to ding when it was time for them to finish breakfast and get ready, right? And so all of those things, all of a sudden, they started getting out the door on time way more often. And in fact, now I don't have to do the alarm on the oven anymore. They just know at this time we need to be done breakfast, and we need to be, so they know the schedule.
Wait, how old are your kids? Like, I feel like I don't know that I could execute with a 4 to 5 year old, but like, I want to execute just like that.
Yeah. So 4 and 5 year olds, maybe a little bit tougher. My girls were a little bit older.
But
So
still,
it was 7,
to your
7,
point,
8,
though,
9, 10.
Okay. To your point, though, like I'm sitting here running this through my head right now. I'm like, my wife does a really good job of saying, I get the boys out of the house in the morning, but she does a good job of the kids' clothes are all laid out. I don't have to think about what that is. The lunches are all made for the day before. Like, she's taking care of everything, but they still wander around. Oh man.
Well, come on, Bob.
Let's give me some ideas here.
Look, I'm not falling into trap number 1 here. I want to be very clear, Michael.
Yeah, exactly.
Bob, how often do you even show up on time when we're going to record every Wednesday?
Oh, anyways.
Right?
Way to go.
Just in your DNA. But if I had a better process, I would make sure you were in the room on time, ready to go.
I read something recently, or I saw something that basically said that, like, the things that annoy you about other people are probably something about yourself. So, Chad, are you putting the mirror in my face right now? Is that what you just did right there? You just held it right up in my face.
Putting the mirror in your face. So, and that right there, you just, with that story alone, Michael, just to recap, don't blame. So it's not blaming your girls in this case, and it's Bob not blaming his kids, and it's us not blaming the people that we work with. It's look in the mirror, right? So what am I doing? Where's my DNA on that? Hey, I'm not staying on top of the kids. Bob's probably too busy in his email or his text messages to be chasing the boys to get them ready or whatever it might be. And then, as you said, part 3 or habit 3 is engineer the solution, which is fix the process, not the people. In your situation, it's put a clock here. It's set the alarm there. We might not need to do that in a career location. We're all grown-ups. Yet, maybe again, we do need to have a meeting where an alarm goes off 45 minutes into the meeting so people know we got to wrap this up. It was an hour committed on the calendar or whatever that might be.
Exactly.
Fix the solution with the process, not blaming the people.
Yeah, and exactly. And that other example that I gave you about my assistant's assistant, you know what? We looked at the process. There was a fault in the process. It was making it way too easy for us to delete things that shouldn't be deleted. But actually, one of the things we actually haven't spent very much time on the look in the mirror. And I'll tell you, I think it's super powerful. And I'll just tell you a story about why. And remember, the name of the book is How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. And here's the spoiler alert. The best way to inspire accountability is to demonstrate accountability yourself by demonstrating these 3 habits. But I'll show you how it actually inspires other people to do the same thing.
Okay.
So habit 2 is when you're looking in the mirror. So I actually had a client, a construction company, and I heard a story from a project manager, and he kind of confided in me. He's like, honestly, Michael, the general manager is kind of a blamer, and what we do is, he said, every week we have a team meeting where we review the work from the previous week. And usually we're talking about problems. And when we do talk about problems, the general manager almost always finds somebody to blame. Now, when he finds his victim and he goes to blame that person, of course, and the person gets defensive, they start to deflect blame elsewhere, and the meeting just takes a nosedive. And he's like, that's what happens virtually every single week. And it just deteriorates. Not a very effective meeting. So he said, the week after you taught us about the 3 habits of personal accountability, things went really differently. He said, it started the same way it usually starts, which is we were reviewing problems from the previous week, or a problem from the previous week. The general manager, you could see his eyes lock on his target, and he was about to launch into the blame. But then he said you could actually see the general manager stop. He sort of put his head in his hand for a moment.
That's not amalgam. Get that amalgam under control back there, right?
Yeah, that's right. The amygdala. That's right. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was getting the amygdala under control. And then he looked up and he said, this is how I think I contributed to the problem.
Oh, look at that breakthrough. And
then the project manager's like, you would not believe it. The tone of the meeting changed just like that. He said, and not only that, other people in the room began to say, no, boss, it wasn't just your fault. This is how I think I contributed to the problem.
Yeah.
And everybody started very quickly. Everybody's just like, you know what? This was my bad. This was my bad. This is how I contributed to it. But because they did that, they were able to very quickly start to focus on the solution. Because if you are focused on trying to find somebody to blame, you're going to waste a ton of time trying to find the culprit or pin that blame on them.
You can spend the
If
whole
other
meeting
people-
dealing with the excuses and the reasons, and then you pass the blame bomb over here, and he's like, wait a minute, I got a whole bunch of excuses and reasons too.
Exactly. But if you start off with the blame, you're going to encourage other people to do that. But if you start off with saying, this is how I think I contributed to the problem, more than likely other people are going to step up and say, you know what, and this is how I think I contributed to the problem. But even if they don't, you now have the moral authority to say, and how do you think you've contributed to the problem? Before you've done that, you don't have that moral authority. You might have the title, you might have the actual title authority, but you don't have the moral authority to ask that until you have first offered and said, this is how I think I contributed to the problem. But that's the power, and that's how not only demonstrating these 3 habits of personal accountability not only makes you a better leader, it literally inspires other people to step up and take more accountability themselves.
You know why that story, that's a great story. One of the reasons why I love that story is it happens fast, right? Like literally from one week to the next, one time that guy taking, looking in the mirror and it changed fast, right?
The project manager, he was like, you could just feel the feeling, the energy in the room just totally changed the moment our leader said that. And it just made it instantly a safer place for everybody else to say, and you know what, this was my part.
Yeah. Chad, Ben's super good at that, right? Like,
I was just going to say,
very rarely does he start a conversation about any kind of a problem without taking some ownership. They'll take ownership of it. And almost every time, Michael, what happens is somebody else in the room goes, no, that was me. That was me. I totally messed that up too. And I've got tons of text chains that have that kind of thing on it with different parts of our organization where the people are just more than willing to take accountability. And it does come from our leader.
And Michael, that then creates a culture within that company where we know it's a safe place when someone does do something wrong to be able to say, hey, I did this wrong. And Bob, we were interviewing some other great presenters, authors who were talking about this. Not only do they then say, hey, I was wrong, we get into a situation where it's really safe for people to be able to say, help me. It becomes that whole culture that is created in an organization. You want to create one, that's a way to do it.
Yeah, you guys are lucky that you have a leader who just does that naturally.
Yeah.
But I remember I was talking to a guy not too long ago as I was having dinner with an acquaintance, or just a new acquaintance, and he was just telling me he works for a big oil and gas company, and he was like, that is not our culture, right? We have a culture of like the leader, the person in the leadership position thinks that they're being a good leader by finding somebody and crucifying them, right? And that's what it means in their culture to hold somebody accountable, is to just obliterate them, right? Because their boss is like, well, what are you doing? And when their boss is saying, well, what are you doing about this? There's like, I don't know. Let me find somebody to kill. Okay. and that's like, and that's my job as a manager. And I'm being a good boss. I'm making sure we're getting the right results. But in fact, they're just encouraging everybody to either duck and cover or hide their mistakes better, which is in fact what we know blame does within the organization.
That's old leadership. That's old leadership. That's baby boomer leadership. Forgive me to our baby boomer listeners and all that stuff. You were brought up in leadership like that. And it's grown to a point where, millennials aren't going to work in an organization that brings that towards it. And sadly, it's modeled in our country. I mean, what's our media do every single day? They're like, here's the problem and here's who you can blame for it.
Totally.
And I'm not saying anything left or right. I'm just saying that's just general. That's what we keep seeing. We have to work on each one of us being the leader that inspires accountability, whether that means just our department, whether that means our whole organization, whether that means my neighbor around the corner, down the street, whether that means my kids in my house. We all can be the leader that can inspire that accountability.
For sure. I'm glad you mentioned that, because yes, our society, in fact, and I think to a large extent the media, when we hear the word accountability, it's usually something like this, like
consequences.
This person needs to be held accountable, right? Yeah. But what they're really saying is that this person is to blame and they should be punished.
That's right.
And we have unintentionally, as a society, kind of used those words accountability and blame and punishment interchangeably, when in fact they are different things. And actually, you just kind of reminded me, we should probably define what accountability is and what it's not. We've established what it's not. It's not blame, but what is it? Accountability is more about, accountability is about results, and it's about taking ownership of results and working to improve future results. That's what accountability is. It's about, hey, look, we just want to have this. We always want to be striving to get the right results, and that's taking accountability. But something else actually that kind of helps define accountability is to actually talk about another thing that it is not and often gets confused with, which is responsibility. It's something interesting to note is that responsibility is about taking ownership of tasks. Accountability is taking ownership of results.
Yes. Say that again. Say that again, Michael.
Responsibility is taking ownership of tasks. Accountability is taking ownership of results. And I'll give you an example of this difference and how it was really made clear to me. I remember one time in industry when I was working at Human Resources, we had this payroll supervisor. We'll call her Susan. And she said, and she was quite possibly the most responsible person in the organization. And we would ask her, anytime we'd ask her to do something, she'd say, yes, I'll do that. But can you send it to me in an email so I can make sure to do it just right? Sure, no problem. I'll send it to you in an email. But anytime we didn't get the results that we were looking for, she was the very first person to say, you can't blame me. I'm only doing what you told me to do, and it's written right here. She wanted nothing to do with results. She was solely focused on simply what I've heard somebody else call work to rule, which is I just want to do my task. Now, we do want responsible people. Being responsible is good, right? If you do everything on your job description, you're a responsible person. But we all know that you can do everything you're supposed to do and still not get the right results. If people are satisfied with that, with simply doing what they're supposed to do and not really caring about the results, that's not what we're looking for. And so that's why, and I think what managers can do, people in leadership positions can do to instantly make a change of culture is to stop focusing people so much on completing tasks and say, look, this is the result that we're after, right? You use your own creativity, your own discretion, and figure out how are we going to get to that end result. But that in and of itself is going to increase the level of accountability within your organization if you simply understand what accountability is and the difference between accountability and responsibility.
As I heard you tell the story of Susan, and then I wrote down that accountability was ownership of the results, but also you had said and the responsibility is something to improve the future results. And I think what Susan was doing is that second portion of the description of accountability was nowhere on her radar.
Exactly.
Right? Like she just wanted to like whatever I need to do, and you tell me to do it, and I'll do it the way you said to. But like there's no the accountability kicks in when she says, I'm actually thinking about how I could make this process even better potentially.
And this goes back to the improving future results, kind of goes back to something that Chad talked about, when we're talking about the difference between confidence and arrogance. One of the best ways that you can improve future results is, in fact, to go to habit 2, which is to look in the mirror. But that's actually something that what we do is one of these engineered solutions, you might call it, is at the end of every project or at the end of any kind of time interval, let's say at the end of every quarter or something like that, I always suggest that leaders, people in leadership positions, initiate a lessons learned debrief. And this is where we set our egos aside and we say, look, what are the things that went well? And what can we do to make sure that those things continue to go well? What didn't go well? And what can we do to make sure that those things don't happen again? And that's really kind of one of the key aspects of improving future results is being willing to look in that mirror and to say, what can we change to improve future results? So anyways, thanks.
Wow. We're just scratching the surface with Michael Timms here, author of How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. We'll have a link to the book in the show notes. Make sure you check those out. Folks, I told you that he's probably going to come back in season 3. I don't know if you got another book on the horizon, but we still haven't talked about all the other things that you can bring us, such as leaders showing gratitude, such as creating succession plans. And boy, I don't want to get started on those right now because we're going to have to just go through them too quickly. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you right now, would you be willing to come back when we get to season 3? Yes, folks, there will be a season 3 of Win, Make, Give. Will you come back when we get to season 3 and share some more with us?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. And I appreciate you having me on this time. And yeah, I know I maybe kind of hijacked your interview by telling a whole bunch of different stories and going off.
Not at all. It wasn't our interview. It was your interview. We just get to be the venue that gets to host you and share all that stuff. And plus, I want to hear more about some good hiking in the area that you've done, so we can talk more about that. Michael, I want to put you on the spot right now. Season 2, we focused on the give of Win, Make, Give. And we want to make a donation to a charity as a thank you for you to be joining us here today. So, Michael, pick one for us. What charity is it we can make a donation to?
Yeah, that's an easy one. That's the Calgary Homeless Foundation. They're a client, and their mission is to fight homelessness in that city, and they're doing a lot of great things. So yeah, if you'd be willing to make a donation to the Calgary Homeless Foundation, that'd be awesome.
We are absolutely willing as a thank you to you for joining us. You see, now, Bob, I usually go into this long spiel according to you and Ben that nobody ever listens to because they don't want to know what we're talking about. But Bob, they want to stay involved. And that means they got to come to facebook.com/group/win-make-give where the conversation goes on. You want to find out the fun stuff that's happening, like the hat that Bob got me the other day, that the snowball fight we're going to have next week because it's going to snow up here, the pizza that Bob's eat. Yeah, it's in the Facebook group. Come to facebook.com/group/win-make-give, get the behind the scenes stuff, and continue the conversation from each and every episode. And folks, until our next episode, and yes, we are getting close to the end of season 2, believe it or not, we're about to hit episode 100 for season number 2. Make sure you stick with us for the last few episodes this season has, so that you know what to expect for season number 3. Until we come back to our next episode and share all of that, remember, do good,